Okay, so here we are in Anton Barbeau's studio, and the very first thing you notice on this purple door here is an eyeball. So what's that all about?
I don't even know. I just don't ask.
Maybe it has something to do with one of your latest videos, right? With the eyeball.
I couldn't even tell you. I'm just too afraid to ask.
You're afraid to ask? Did your wife put that there?
No, I did.
And he's afraid to
I'm
ask.
still afraid to ask, yeah. When I was very little, I was driving with my mother in her Studebaker. She had a green Studebaker. It must have been maybe 1970. Maybe I was 3. I was just old enough to know what songs were, what songs I liked, you know? Mm-hmm. And music was always just the most essential thing. And so she had the radio on in the car. Some song came on that I didn't know. And I asked her, what is this? What is it? You know, and she didn't know either. And there was no Shazam in those days, right? So, and the DJ didn't come on to tell us what it was. So it's this mystery song, this magical song that I think just burned into my mind as this archetype. This is this golden piece of pop music, this unknown piece of magic sound. And my child, you shall now spend the rest of your life chasing this song. And after I'd written Waiting on the Radio, he points to the bus. After I'd written the song, at some point I thought, I think I wrote that song. I think I've done it. I think I've written the song that I've been chasing my whole life.
Anton, thank you for welcoming me into your house.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Let's just start from the beginning. Were you born in this area?
Yeah, I was born in Sacramento in 1967.
What was your earliest musical influences?
Well, the Beatles.
Of course.
Yeah, I remember just crawling around through my parents' record collection, always trying to find the one that had "I Want to Hold Your Hand" on it. And still my favorite song. You know, that song has everything you could ever want from a piece of music. But yeah, I was a Beatle baby, and they had The Doors and Simon and Garfunkel and the soundtrack from Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar, and you know, just all that, you know, very kind of 60s housewife hippie stuff.
So then, what was the first instrument that you gravitated towards?
Well, I took Yamaha music lessons when I was very little, and I don't remember much about it, but I think the Yamaha method is based on ear training. So they stick you in front of the little Yamaha organ, and you learn to pick out notes by ear. And even though I don't remember much about that, I think that had an impact. My mother played guitar, and she would sing and play guitar for me. But it was keyboards that I think I was most drawn to. And so, you know, I had a friend with a piano. I'd go to hang out at his place, and I'd always pick a few tunes on the piano. Or my grandmother had a piano, same thing. And so, I think 1980, my dad saw me playing a Casio tone, the Casio tone 201. I've got one again over there. Yeah, Casio tone 201. This was the first model that Casio put out, and
wow.
Yeah, and I sold my original one long ago, but just had to.
Of course.
Had to have another one. And, I love this thing. I really
do. It has a great sound.
Yeah, there's something about it. Here's a Wurlitzer, which my dad got me as a birthday gift. He bought this from David Houston when David had it at Moon Studios.
Okay.
You know, it's the classic sound, right? But anyway, my dad saw me playing this Casio tone, and he got it for me because he thought, you know, my son's got some talent here, so he got me that, and I started writing songs age 13 on the Casio tone.
Did the original thing come fairly quickly?
Yeah, that was the first thing I wanted to do. That's what music was for me. It's like, you know, the Beatles wrote songs, I want to write songs. And there was, you know, I'm sure I wrote my own song before I learned anybody else's. So
yeah, talk about how you kind of developed your your style? Because I really think your style is very unique.
I think by now I've kind of got a collection of little stories, but one of them was just hearing Gary Newman doing Cars, and that just changed my life, boom. And it's kind of funny because, as I said, I grew up as a Beatles baby, but when the new wave and punk thing hit, it just opened everything up. And so Gary Newman was sort of the spark. That's what made me, his music made me want to play my own music. And the funny thing is, the first song I wrote, it's called Come Back, and it sounds like a Buddy Holly thing. So me, age 13, writing a Buddy Holly song, and yet somehow the spark was from Gary Newman, and you asked how my style developed. Maybe it's all in that answer, because I couldn't explain it otherwise. How does Gary Newman turn into Buddy Holly, turn into Anton Barbeau? I don't quite, and that's it. I've always loved diversity in music and perversity in music. And so my style is kind of incorporating things that I adore and things that I can't stand, not necessarily in equal measure, but, yeah, I was sort of a little bit younger than a lot of the people who were out there. And so I was at first just staying home and doing my own thing, kind of making my little songs secretly. Started going out to Club Can't Tell. I had friends who could get me in there, because I was underage. But so Club Can't Tell was a big place for me, and I saw God. I remember seeing the Circle Jerks open for Game Theory there, and Let's Active and Translator. The Coincidence, my friend Steve Green was in the Coincidence with Scott Galloway and those guys. Mono Tribe. I remember I used to go see Mono Tribe, and one of the guys from Mono Tribe ended up living in my dad's basement for a little while. The Mood Swings. Yeah. So kind of a mix of the Hoozles, it's all coming back now. Michigan Impossible. So many great bands from the Sacramento area, and of course all the touring bands. It's just so Club Can't Tell was kind of heaven in that regard.
It was a great place to play. Did you ever play there?
Played there once, and I don't think it went down very well. I remember standing on a bar stool on stage, so I'm 17 feet in the air, and just thinking, okay, what do I do now? Because I wasn't Jim Morrison, it turns out, and so I think I just kind of crawled back down off the bar stool and finished the set, and it, and maybe one or two people were happy that I didn't kill myself or that I was finished singing. I don't know.
So then when you started playing your own music, you put together a band, or were you always just known as Anton Barbeau, or was there a band that was associated with you, or?
I started first, the first performances were with my friend Steve Green. We did a thing called the Psychedelic Love Cowboys, and just a duo, a little acoustic folk punk comedy duo, something like that. We did the harmony stuff that we loved, the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel, and we did a lot of Robin Hitchcock tunes and odds and ends. I think we did Monkees. We did a few Monkees songs and things like that, and we would sort of work our own songs into the set. Maybe because we were probably doing short sets in those days, opening for other people. I think we opened for Thin White Rope and True West and Mojo Nixon. Those are the people I remember. So we played with the first two bands a couple times. I think at Spanky's. We were talking about that earlier. Playing at Spanky's. We'd work in one or two songs of our own into our set list, and so that was great fun. It was great. That's where I learned to be a performer, or maybe learned that I was a performer. I'd done a magic act before that. I tried my luck as a magician.
Oh, talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, my uncle lived with me, and my dad lived with us for 7 years, and he had been a professional magician himself when he was young, and so he passed on his magic kit to me. So I became a magician, did a few gigs like that, And then I got into acting. My first role was in the school play as Jesus in Godspell, and it was kind of downhill from there. I joined a children's acting group in Old Sacramento, and just kind of, I wasn't very good at it. Wasn't great, and I think I knew that. I could feel my own kind of resistance to. I couldn't break through into a character. I was still this kid trying to be an actor doing acting. If you see what I mean, like the layers. And somewhere in there is when my dad got me that Casio tone, and I just remember being at home playing keyboard while waiting for the ride to rehearsal for the play we were doing. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to do the music thing. So anyway, so performance was definitely a thing that I knew I wanted to be doing one way or another. So once I got on stage with the Psychedelic Love Cowboys, I just kind of went crazy, and this is who I am. Bleeding all over the guitar simply because I didn't know how to use a guitar pick. Ow.
Bleeding for your art.
Yeah. So that turned into kind of a solo thing. I started doing solo gigs, and I'd been making cassettes on a 4-track, and I gave a couple of them to John Bacigalupi, who ran Enharmonic, recording studio, and Mad Rover record label. And John said, "Hey, I really like this tape, and I'll tell you what, if you put a band together, I'll get you guys in the studio, and we'll see what we can do with that." And so I said, "Okay." And I think Eric Clevin, the bass player, was he was the first guy I asked. I knew of his legend around town, and saw him. I'd see him at City College where I was taking classes, and I think he was teaching there. So I asked him. I said, "Hey, I've made this tape. Would you be interested in playing with me?" I think my previous tapes had gotten a little bit of press, local press, and the Sacramento Bee and elsewhere. So people were starting to know my name and hear the music a little bit anyway. So Eric, I don't know if he knew me already, but I just walked up and said, here's my tape. Would you be in my band? And he says, "Yeah, sure." So that was off to a really good start, right? And I'd met Michael Urbano at a party a little bit before all this. So I thought, and he said, "Hey man, do you ever want me to play drums?"
Wow,
and
great.
So I thought, all right. So I got in touch with him, said, "Hey, I've got Eric Clevin playing bass." And he says, "Well, sounds good to me." And this led to, we originally had a guitar player, Craig Latham, who was in a band called the Flying Boats. And I think Flying Boats were my favorite band in Sacramento. I love those guys, would see them wherever I could. So we had Craig in the band, but his style was very pentatonic, I think, and a lot of what the Flying Boats did was really atmospheric. And so I had wanted to incorporate that, but it wasn't quite right with Craig. And so Urbano said, "Hey, what about my friend Don Hawkins from All Fell Down?" And All Fall Down?
All Fall Down, and then Internal Affairs,
Yeah.
Flex.
Yeah.
Their episode I just aired today.
Okay.
Yeah.
But is All Fell Down or All Fall Down? All
Fall
Fell
Down. Yeah,
Okay.
All Fell Down.
I used to, I'd see them at Club Can't Tell as well. Anyway, so Urbano suggested Don. Don said, "Yeah, sure." So just like that, we had a band. We started rehearsing, and I think we did a few gigs, and those were fantastic. They were crazy gigs. The first gig ended with this kind of raucous song called "Leaving Icy Behind," and I remember Clevin. He had the Steinberger, that graphite bass, and he takes the bass off at the end, and he's dragging it along the railing that surrounds the stage, dragging it, and then boom, just throws it to the ground, and it bounces, and we've got this on tape. You can hear it, this terrible sound. And Urbano just screams, "Nobody fuck with his band." It was, that was our first gig. It was it ended in chaotic triumph. that was good. And so sometime after that, we went into the studio, went to Enharmonic and started recording. And as much as I loved performing, and I was really excited to be a performer, making records was still my favorite thing in the world. So I was really glad that we were in there making a recording. It was much sort of, and this is a funny complaint that I've had often. I think it was too straight for me. There's the guitar, there's my guitar, there's the drums, there's the bass, here's the vocal, here's a harmony vocal. Okay, next song. And I always like to layer things and mess around with things and, make things go wrong and try to fix them. And so the first recording we did was very straightforward, but it really served us well. We put it out on a cassette. People seemed to really enjoy that. And so it was really nice. It was a really good time. We were a little thing in town. And it's just like late 89, 90, somewhere in there maybe. I don't quite remember. I'm supposed to be writing a book right now, and the friend of mine who's helping me with the book, she says, "You're not really good with chronology, are you?" I said, "Nah, probably not." And I used to be able to sort of measure my musical life based on which record this record came out in this year, but I've put out more records in the last years than I can keep track of, so I have no idea anymore, and time is all one big blurry thing by now. We did a record called The Horse's Tongue, which did really well in Sacramento. This is all very local stuff, right? It did really well. We got we won a Sammy Award for it, best album, whatever. And it was great. It was part of the zeitgeist. There was a sort of the sense of this was a new moment in the Sacramento music scene, and we were up there, and Cake was here, and a lot of energy. Some of it is just a bit, look what I'm doing. I'm doing this thing. This is what I'm doing. I've got big drums. I've got loud guitars. Look at me. I'm doing this thing, and it's great. I'm great. Everything's great. And it's pretty embarrassing for me now. There's a lot of stuff on there that just, no. So that one has vanished. I've re-recorded several of the songs from that record because some of those songs held up fine, and they've been given new life and sometimes new lyrics, tidy things up a little bit.
So in the 80s, early 90s, what was the height of what you thought was an achievable goal that you're proud of even to this day?
Well, I know I was ambitious, and I had the dream, like everybody did, of the record contract, of some sort of external measure of success. And I think I achieved that in my hometown, right? In Sacramento. And it reached a point where I was always on the cover of whatever was out that week. I was a little magazine boy, and I was we had songs on, the what was it, Quad 106, the commercial alternative radio station. So we had songs in rotation on that station. We'd have people coming to the shows saying, "Have you played Heather's song yet?" "No, not yet." And I'd play the Heather song, and they'd weep, And so there was kind of, this is great. I'm a star. I'm playing in front of 40 people, because when that is your world, it's enough. And there were phone calls from the record labels. "Hey, is this Anton Barbeau? We've heard lots of great stuff about you, buddy, and we can't wait to meet you. Why don't you send us some stuff? We've heard that you're really like the alternative to the alternative, and we're looking forward to hearing your material because it's supposed to be cutting edge, and we're looking for something different. We don't want another Green Day. We've already got Green Day. We're looking for something new." And then a couple weeks later, "Hey, Anton, buddy, hey, love the stuff you sent. Thanks so much for the stuff. It's great stuff, but it's a little too alternative. We're looking for something a bit more like Green Day. But we really appreciate you sending the stuff in, and you take care, and we'll keep track, and, keep in touch, buddy. All right, ciao now, Right. I mean, I had a few people at Sony who took my calls and paid attention and were really sweet to me. They said, "You've got to get out and tour. You've got to," because we were regional, and that was as far as my band could go. We couldn't really travel more than 2 hours from Sacramento. Everybody just had real lives, and this was not their only band. This was not their life. And I didn't know any better, so I just thought, but I'm the king of this territory. I'm fine. Dude, you've really got to tour. You've got to get out. No, you know. A billion years later, I make this record, Man Bird, and that speaks to all of that, right? It's all about kind of not wanting to leave the grid, right? You know, I don't want to, but I'm the king of my king of the block, really. And I just didn't know any better. So in a way, I did as well as I wanted to, with the exception of the big major label record deal that was going to be somewhere else, some other time, you know. But for that moment, it was enough. So yeah, I moved to the Bay Area. I had a new band, had a new girlfriend. I had a record deal pending. And within weeks of moving there, all of those things fell apart too. And that's just life, right? And so I kind of bided my time. I lived with my grandmother, and that was really good. Just to be with her, you know, to have that time with her, that was cool. And I did a lot of interesting stuff musically, but I was very quiet about it. And at some point I thought, you know, all I want to do is make a record. And so I kind of cut off my hair, snuck back to Sacramento, where there'd been they'd put it in the press. Anton Barbeau is he's leaving Sacramento. He's moving on, and the fact that I was enough of a somebody to get press for leaving town was pretty funny, you know. But yeah, I sort of came back with my tail between my legs and with my hair cut off. I didn't tell anybody, and I just made a record and thought, this is what I want to do. Just keep making records, and you know, all the rest of it, you know, it comes as it comes, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, Man Bird for me is one of the probably, you know, one of the most important records personally that I've made, and a big part of that is because it speaks to ultimately my return to Sacramento. I was on tour in Spain, and Julia, my wife, was with me. We weren't married yet, but she was with me in Spain. We had a night off, and we went out to the cinema. We saw the film Lady Bird, which is, of course, famously, you know, for us locals, is set in Sacramento. It's about kind of, you know, Greta Gerwig's growing up as a Catholic schoolgirl in Sacramento. And for her, the idea is that she just can't wait to get out. And of course, we've already been talking about how for me, I didn't want to leave. I was safe, and I was the king of the hill. So here we were in Madrid watching this film, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is my life. I was a Catholic schoolboy. There's so many parallels. So much of it is filmed in places that I'm absolutely familiar with. One of the houses shown in Lady Bird, somebody pointed out that, oh yeah, we used to rehearse in the house next door to that. You know, so, or the Raven is down the street from my dad's house, or McKinley Park. You know, I've spent 1,000 hours in McKinley Park just in the last year alone, right? So that's my hood. It's all very familiar. And the film was so resonant in that way. But again, the idea for me was I didn't want to leave. I was afraid to leave until I finally left. And once I left. I moved to England. You know, I left Sacramento and ended up in the UK for years, and then from there moved to Berlin. So here we were in Madrid and watching this film. And after the film, we went and we're having a chocolate somewhere, I think, and talking about, we're going to make a film called Man Bird. It'll be a sort of a spoof of Lady Bird. And we were talking about this, and you know, I knew the title was good, and we kind of joked around for a little while and had a laugh. And at some point, I thought, well, no, that title is too good to waste it on a spoof film idea. It's got to be a song. And I thought maybe it's an album, and because it really occurred to me, we're in Madrid. I've obviously left the nest. I've finally done it. I've finally done this thing that I didn't even know I needed to do. And my life at that point was touring. You know, I lived in Berlin. I toured Spain twice a year. I toured the UK at least once a year. I ended up in a band in Paris for a while, you know, making records over there. We went to Abbey Road, you know, blah, 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 blah. I did all this stuff all over the place, and that was my life. So the idea of Man Bird returning home because I, at this point, was flying back and forth. I was seeing Julia. Like I said, we weren't married yet, but I was coming back here to see her and to see my dad. And then I was back to Berlin. And so I was living this constant back and forth life, or I was on tour. I was always on an airplane or in an airport, and was never really grounded. And so maybe the idea was that I needed to come back home and kind of just get my feet back in the earth. So the Manbird album, the Manbird song, is all about that, coming back. Where is home? Maybe it's Berlin, maybe it's Sacramento, but just come home. So yeah, the song, the lyrics in the song and the lyrics across the album speak to all of this stuff, and I highly recommend it. Listeners, purchasers, and just for your information, we filmed much of that video in this basement.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before we turned it into a studio space. We very deliberately incorporated footage of the houses I grew up in. One near City College and one kind of near Sierra 2, near Curtis Park. We've lots of footage of just the good old days.
The good old days. Waiting on the Radio, one of my favorite songs. The video's fantastic too, and we'll talk again when we bring in Julia. We'll talk specifically about how you guys decided to do the video. But the impetus for that song and the melody, where did that come from?
Waiting on the Radio is part of an album called Morgen Music Nachtschlager, and most of that album was written in Berlin. And then I came back here to California, and I was playing with the contrast, the cold German light and the golden light of California. And that song, I've been having a conversation with Michael Urbano, who I've continued to play with on and off all these years, which I'm grateful for, because he's one of the finest musicians. He's one of the musicians who I think I learn the most from. And I've learned how, many times over, I've learned how my own songs go when I play them with him. And I said, dude, I will write you a song. Let me write you something really good. I'll write you something here. And it turned into a joke later. I would, at gigs, I would explain that, when I was younger, I used to write songs to impress girls. Now I write songs to impress drummers. And I think there's a truth in that song was written with his level of greatness in mind. I have to write something that reaches, that's worth his time. And I don't remember much about writing the song other than it was on, this little 12 string. That's not the sound we want. Wait. There we go. That's the sound.
There you go.
That's the beautiful golden light of California. So I wrote it on the 12 string, and just the song itself tells a little story about this guy just trying to get to Reno for some reason, taking the Greyhound bus. Do we still have the bus here?
Oh,
Props.
there we go.
There we go.
That's the bus in the video, which I'm going to be showing some of the video.
As seen on TV.
Nice.
Yeah, and so there's this sort of story of the song was just trying to do something for Urbano to play on, and the funny thing was he ended up getting the Lindsey Buckingham tour. After all, it had been canceled originally because of COVID. He got the tour. He's like, I'm out of here. I got to go. So he didn't even play on the track after all, which is funny. But it does feature other heroes of mine. And these go back. Some of these are, Colin Moulding from XTC was one of the bands that just changed my life, right? The XTC changed my life. Colin Moulding is on the song doing backing vocals. Donald Ross Skinner, who was Julian Cope's right-hand man for years. And can we use language here?
Oh yeah.
Musical motherfucker, Donald Ross Skinner. And then Andy Metcalf, who was with the Soft Boys and Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians, and who I played with for years in a band called 3 Minute Teas when I lived in the UK. Andy's on there. So these guys together, like, that's a powerful combination. These are heroes of mine, and they're all crammed together on this track.
Wow.
Chris Stamey from the DBs is on there. He's just barely on there because he came in very late, but he's doing these ghost vocals, waiting on the radio, just the very end of the song. So it's a really cool collection for me of musical heroes. And what they add musically, of course, is just heavenly. It's not just, this guy's a favorite, let's get his name in the credits. It's like, no, listen to Donald's guitars. Amazing. So that's kind of the guts of the story of that song. Still get goosebumps when I think about that.
Well, now we're here with Julia, Anton's lovely wife, who is also very much involved in the creative process. That she does the videos for Anton. They work together. But
let's see. I've been a photographer for most of my life, which is strange to realize. I think I started photographing when I was maybe 9 years old or so, and entered photos in the county fair and won some ribbons and thought, I like this. And my original plan was to go more toward commercial photography, but the more I did that, the less I enjoyed it. So I kind of decided along the way to head toward graphic design instead and keep photography. And then later video as just the art in my life. So I think what was our first video?
Clubbing in Berlin.
Oh gosh, that's right. That was kind of when we realized that we really liked each other.
Yeah, on film.
We worked well together, and we just really liked each other. But I think I always find that whenever he puts out a new album, that there's usually a song or two that just feel very visual to me, and so I enjoy taking that and running with it, and teasing out what's the visual analog for this track.
And so usually what's your creative process? So you guys discuss the song ahead of time, or do you kind of, like you said, go, hey, I think that would really make a nice video, and then you kind of talk about the aesthetics of it, or how does that usually work for you guys?
It depends. I think it depends on the song. Sometimes something like Man-Bird was very storyboarded. We just kind of, we saw it all.
At a buffet in Reno, an all you can eat buffet at a, what was the hotel?
The Peppermill.
The Peppermill in Reno.
Quite surreal.
We just sat there on napkins.
Some downtime and a pile of napkins, yeah. And that one just sort of emerged as, here's what it looks like. There's a nest, there's a suitcase, there's all the pieces, there's a green screen.
She built the nest that's featured in the video is actually still outside, and she built it by hand. She built a nest.
Grapevines and twigs.
Yeah. By the magic of video.
Yeah.
That was sort of a key piece to that video. But yeah, I think we just had that album as a whole had such an image and concept to it. Traveling, moving back and forth, living out of a suitcase. So the pieces were all kind of there, and then it was just
leaving the nest and returning to the nest.
The literal nest, yeah. And we knew Sacramento had to be part of it. We knew that scenery that you grew up with, the neighborhoods were going to be part of it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece, not only from the songwriting part, but the visual as well. It marries very well together. So it's no wonder that you guys are married.
I'm a huge fan of pop videos. I've just always loved music videos, and when they really turn out where it feels like the song and the video are one, that's magic to me, because it's easy to do videos that just don't do that feel like, well, that the video's over there, but here's the song anyway. But so
obligatory accompaniment to the song versus something that feels like it's all of a piece.
But yeah,
on purpose.
I think with Manbird, the video for Manbird is so absolutely true to the song, and it feels like the video to me clearly comes out of the song.
It's a little film that goes with that song, and I think my favorites of our videos, and most of them really feel like they're little films. I don't think of them as music videos as much as just little short films that have a soundtrack.
Well, the best, in my opinion, the best music videos are miniature films, because it explains the song rather than just
it's a little world.
Exactly. Yeah. The other one I really, really liked is Waiting on the Radio. Just the concept of it, and we talked about it in your interview, how that was the song that you'd been chasing all these years, and you finally wrote it. And I think the traveling component on the bus, where did that come from, as far as the idea of the little pictures within the pictures, and singing on the bus?
We have the bus.
There's the bus.
I think that's really what it started with. I'm not sure how, I guess just because the song talks about riding on the bus to Reno, right?
Reno,
direction. We kind of knew, well, that has to be in there somehow. And then I just went online and looked up these little vintage tin toy buses that are collectible now, and we found one and thought, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. And it has little green windows and little wheels that spin. So the bus just sort of dictated what happened around it, I think.
Green windows, which are of course very green screen compatible.
Obviously each of those windows had to have someone in it, and then the bus had to be traveling, so we had to go to Reno to film roadside footage. To slot in there.
Our budget is usually, if we spend $100 making a video, then we
not even. It's usually.
So in this case, Julia found the bus, and I think we did drive up to Reno. But yeah, I always think of that one as, because we do collaborate really well, and we collaborate in different ways each time we do something. But with Waiting on the Radio, I always feel like that was so much your vision. You saw things in there that I just said, whatever you want to do, man. Because she always gets it right. But in a way that's completely unique as well. And I think we both. Sometimes I think with videos, I want to play with motifs and bring things back around. And so we've done that with a few songs like Manbird, and then Across the Drama Pond, where we got the pigeons come back again and again. But I think with Waiting on the Radio, it just feels like, I don't remember if we have pigeons in there or not, but somehow it feels like you started, I don't want to say from a completely new place, but it feels like a fresh start video wise, and it was very much your vision, I think, for this one. And
that song had so many important people on it. Everybody on that song was there for a reason. They were all parts of your life and your musical history and heroes and friends. And so, yeah, the idea of just, even though they were recording their pieces and sending them from all over the world, we got everybody on the bus together. That felt like they've all got to be in that little bus, just traveling on the road, all in one direction. So that became the motif.
I'm waiting on the radio. I've heard it all, I know you know. I'm waiting on the radio to sing me something golden. I'm trying to find my way back home. This bus is busted, tire blown. So I'm waiting on the radio to sing me something golden. To sing me something golden.
Julia, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing more of your work together in the future. So
Yeah, me too.
and
It's always interesting.
you talked a little bit about your time, obviously in Europe, and you mentioned you did some things at Abbey Road. Talk about that.
Yeah, I was in a French band called Salt, and I was living in Berlin, so being in a band in Paris was just a train ride or a quick flight, which is an amazing thing to think about. Now I'm living on a farm where, in order to go anywhere, you have to get in the car. You always have to get in a car, but it was just so easy to just zip around in Europe. And to feel so European, Ciao. So yeah, the band Salt originally formed as part of this tribute to Scott Miller from Game Theory, and Scott was a friend of mine, and I'd done various bits and pieces with him over the years, and we ended up doing a record together. And then, tragically, he took his life and just broke all of our hearts.
Yes, it did.
So there was a record being put together. I guess when it came out, it was listed as a Game Theory record, which I never agreed with that. To me, it's like that wasn't quite right. But it wasn't my call. And but nonetheless, it was a record that was made out of the shared love we have for Scott and his music. And so I did a track with some of these French guys and an American producer. And the first session was at Abbey Road, Studio 2. I said, okay. And it was for me, it was an incredible week, because days before going to Abbey Road, I'd gone over to Swindon to do a video with Colin Moulding from XTC. He'd played on one of my songs, and I'd not met him until going to his house to do the video. And so then we did the lip syncing and had just a wonderful day with him. And then 2 days later, I think it was, I'm in Studio 2, and just what a week. That's one of the weeks of my life, I can tell you.
Did you kind of feel the ghosts of some of the people before you, the vibe of the Beatles or the Pink Floyd? And
oh yeah,
while you were there.
Are you kidding? Walked in there, and I just remember clapping my hands and thinking, I know that sound. I know the sound of this room. You clap your hands. This is the holiest sound there is. Absolutely, of course. You cannot not feel that. Go there and trying to think about all the different people. And of course, all you can think about is the Beatles, but you're trying to remember everybody else as well. There's the Mrs. Mills piano, which the Beatles used on a number of tracks, but that's also what Rod Argent plays on the Zombies' Care of Cell 44. Ding, 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 ding. Like, I know this piano. I know this piano. And I remember having going off to have a pee and thinking, I bet John and Paul must have, I'm sure they replaced the toilets by now, but John and Paul must have pissed in here. Oh my God, So yeah, of course, I think that maybe the coolest thing about being at Abbey Road was having lunch in the canteen, just what are you having? Can I just have a cup of tea, please? Oh yeah, just have a cup of tea. So we did this we did a track. I was the lead vocalist on this thing. And sorry, you can chop this part out, but I do remember they'd hired a French videographer to make a video while we were doing the song. And here I am doing my vocals at Abbey Road on a U-47 mic, and I've got this little French fuckhead spinning around me in his little French shoes, and I just wanted to smack him. I'm like, do you mind while I do my fucking vocal, you moron? Oh no, that's okay. I have a vision. Anyway, I digress. So this was.
There's no way I'm chopping that out of this.
That
was too good.
The video did turn out great. I have to say, the guy did a great job. I was in a band, a sort of a teenage rec room band. We weren't quite a garage band. with this guy named Mike Messersmith, and he's one of those people, you know, a lot of stuff revolves around this guy, right? And he knows stuff. And so and this is early 80s. He's the guy who says, you got to listen to Joe Jackson. You know, let's listen to the specials. You know, he's got the record collection, and he played us, I think, Drums and Wires, XTC's third record, and just loved it, you know, loved it. For some reason, I had this idea that I was mixing up XTC and Gang of Four, and I thought that Sarah Lee, who was the bass player for Gang of Four, I thought she was in XTC. So it was a few years before I realized who the bass player was, which of course turns out to be Colin Moulding. So yeah, I really loved XTC from the first moment I heard them. Couple of years later, I think XTC's fifth album, English Settlement, came out, and this song "Senses Working Overtime." I saw the video for that. That was it. That was what did me in. I just started buying the records and became a lifelong fan from there. So yeah, you know, the song we've been talking about of mine, "Waiting on the Radio." It's interesting for me that it does. The song features several of my musical heroes, and Colin's on there singing. That's actually that was the third time I'd worked with him. So by that point, it's like, yeah, it's, you know, hey, Colin, you know, got another track for you, man. And what he brought to the song was wonderful. You know, he did this sort of the straight harmony part, the part that I had already sung, you know, on the demo. But he added this sort of magnificent backing vocal thing that, you know, when you break that bit down, you think, okay, that's just world class. That's the mind of somebody who reaches as far as possible musically, but is still trying to bring something back that is just enjoyable right here. It's not fanciful for its own sake, but it was still this, and it's quite subtle in the track. It's kind of laid down in the backing track. But and Colin also threw in some bonus keyboards, some Chamberlain tracks. So that was great. It was great to have him on that song. So yeah, I mean, to be able to write a song like "Waiting on the Radio," which, as we've already discussed, sort of turned out to be this song that I'd been trying to write for my whole life, and to have all of these people who are in my record collection, the people who are on some of the records that influenced me the most, have all of those people on one song is pretty striking for me, you know. And in the time since that song was recorded and released, I've ended up working with Dave Gregory, also from XTC.
Yeah.
He's played on three songs of mine from some forthcoming on forthcoming albums.
And how did you first meet both of them? I mean, to go from being a fan of the band and then meeting them and eventually working with them.
Well, I'll just throw in that I met Andy Partridge first, and I've never actually met Dave Gregory. I met Andy Partridge at a meet and greet in Sacramento. He was doing a radio promo, and so I went down to the station and met him. And he was familiar with I'd been sending all my tapes to the fan club. And so when I met Andy Partridge, he says, "Oh my God, it's you. I get to finally meet you. I've got all your tapes." And he starts listing them off. And, you know, I've got Back to Balmain and Big Bang Theory. You know, like, you know, he's listing off all my tapes. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
And so that was really a sweet day, you know, kind of had a nice sort of visit. Anyway, as far as Colin, speaking of friends, one of my friends in Swindon is Colin's daughter-in-law, and I don't know if I knew that she was connected to Colin or not at first, because I knew her through the Julian Cope scene. I met her at a Julian Cope gig, you know, and so we were sort of friends. And she would come see my band in Swindon, and eventually I found out, oh, she's Colin's daughter-in-law. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic. But I never pushed for a connection, just because that would have been tacky, I think, you know. But a few years into my knowing her, the band I had with Andy and Morris from, you know, they were of Robin Hitchcock's old group, the Egyptians. That band kind of splintered. Andy quit the band, and I was in the middle of making a record, and I mentioned this to Alex Molding, and she said, why don't you ask Colin if he'd play on the record? You know, if you need a bass player. Like, okay, he's pretty good, isn't he? You know. And so she got me in touch with him, and so I was really glad for that. Right, I didn't solicit this connection, but she presented it when it was appropriate, and so he said, "Yeah, okay, you know, I'll play on something," and so at that point it was all via email. He sent me the track, and we worked it back and forth for a little while. Something about the timing wasn't quite right, and so we went for about 2 weeks. You know, he'd send me a track, I'd work on it, send it back. He'd say, it's not quite lined up. I think it's about 5 milliseconds off. Okay, so I'd adjust it, send it back to him. No, not quite. I think try 7 milliseconds, you know, whatever. So this kind of it was amazing because, again, to hear that mindset, to hear that kind of, again, what do you say, world-class perfection. Mm-hmm. And finally, we kept pushing this track back and forth until we got it right. And I could barely hear the difference. That was lost on me until we got it right. But maybe that was just his enthusiasm. He's like, that's it, you've got it, that's it. But High Noon was the first thing I did with Colin. Urbano was on that track. Urbano wasn't crazy about what I had done with his drums, because on that song I'd mixed in some drum machine tracks and done a lot of quantizing and made it sort of more electronic. He wasn't really crazy about it. And so we worked something out where there was a Spanish label set to release the album as an LP. I said, tell you what, if you want to do a new drum track, just play it straight, play it like Ringo, and we'll go with that. And the CD version will be my weird drum take. And meanwhile, Colin he said, well, I wasn't quite crazy about that bass track. Let me send you another one. So it's really cool that there are two different versions. The second one, Colin is playing what he called the Archie's version. You know, he kind of modeled his track after Yummy, 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 I think. You know, Colin Molding sending me his Archie's bass track. And he threw in some Velvet Underground style piano as well. Here, I thought you might need this. And sent me some hand claps too. Sent me a sample of some hand claps that he'd done. So I've got Colin's hand claps on all my records, you know. Yeah. So one really cute thing that happened that day. Before I got to Swindon, I'd written to Colin and said, "Oh, do you have a telly I can borrow?" I just assumed that he's going to have a Telecaster. Everyone's got a Telecaster, you know. And he says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, maybe I can use it for the video." So we got to his place, and he thought I meant telly as in British television. You know, have you got a telly I can borrow? And so he was puzzled by that. I said, "Oh no, a Telecaster." You know, "Oh right." And so the Telecaster that I ended up using for the video, he said was the one that he and Andy Partridge used for the Wasp Star album, which was the final XTC record. A favorite of mine. And so this was the guitar used on that record, and I thought, this is cool. So I'm playing that, and he's playing his Epiphone in the video. And, you know, we were lip syncing or miming, you know, but nonetheless, between takes, we just started kind of noodling around and jamming, and you know, it was unamplified, but it still counts, right? It's like I'm jamming with Colin Molding. I'm listening, going, this sounds good. This isn't, you know.
Is gonna start.
God, record in the charts, a human cannonball, born of virgin blood. Your mama paid the price, her back against the wall, and so they shot her into space. Said stick this flag into the moon. I knew the sun reflected on its satellite. I knew, has death affected you, your appetite? Son of Dracula, I've seen the script, I know the makeup man. There's rats and bats and stuff inside the crypt, inside the cleanup van, and with the stake right through the heart to burst a bright red blood balloon. I knew the sun reflected on its satellite. Has death affected you, your appetite? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm on about. I tell you.
Let's go back just a little bit, because I was not aware that you were as close to Game Theory and Scott Miller, because you know he produced the album that I was on with the Veil, and him as a producer was. As a teenager myself, first time in the studio, he was very patient, very kind and generous with him. So let's talk a little bit about Game Theory. Let's talk a little bit about Scott and how that all started.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I remember hearing, KDVS was huge for me. KDVS was another of these 1980 ground zero life-changing things. I listened to KDVS religiously, and it's funny because it was the song "I Want to Get Hit by a Car" that I first heard, and I know that the band has pretty much disowned it, and it wasn't a Scott song anyway. But to me, it's like Game Theory, they're a local band, and so the idea of local band was thrilling, right? You'd hear them, or I remember True West's "Lucifer Sam" got their cover of "Lucifer Sam" got a lot of airplay, and Thin White Rope. Doing "You Do Right," the Can song, which I didn't know was Can for years. I thought that was their song. But anyway, so these are the things that were on KDVS that they were local, and it felt important, And so I knew of Game Theory, and when I was 19, I was seeing a woman who had gone out with Joe Becker. She, and they were still good friends. And she said, "Hey, Game Theory and Thin White Rope are playing together at the coffee house. We're going." So we drove out there in her red convertible, and it was a life-changing moment. I mean, Thin White Rope were just astonishing, right? Jesus. And then Game Theory, the contrast was fantastic too between those two bands. But I just remember seeing Scott up there and all his leg moves, his cool leg moves, and I thought, I want to be him. He's my rock star idol. I know he was into taking off his shirt and playing tennis, and he's probably a little bit more athletic than I was, but he was skinny enough and had the curly hair, so I could relate. And it was, he had a higher voice, and I always feel like I sound like a mosquito singing through a fly is how I describe my voice sometimes. And so I could definitely relate, to that. And his songs were brilliant, and the band were brilliant. It was an amazing gig and a life-changing moment. And so that's what kind of clicked that for me. And then I saw them again. I mentioned earlier, we saw them at Club Can't Tell with Circle Jerks. That was the weirdest double bill ever. And I remember meeting Gil at that show and just him being the sweetest guy. I just an amazing drummer, and you guys are wonderful. And he was just so sweet to me. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is how rock stars ought to behave. You know, he was just happy to talk to somebody, who's happy to talk to him. What a lovely guy. And so I think the third time that I saw Game Theory, and this was that's another one of those sort of moments, right? Crossroads. Game Theory were opening for Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians. And at this point, I'd become a huge Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians fan. Another life-changing band, And so to see Game Theory with Robin and the Egyptians was really something. And I had a cassette, I had my little Back to Balmain cassette. And I brought 4 copies to this gig. It's a Fillmore. 4 copies with me. And when Joe Becker came up to say hi, I said, hey, could you give this to Scott Miller? And he's, yeah, sure. So that's one tape taken care of. After the gig, a friend said, hey, do you want to come back and meet Robin and the Egyptians? I can get you backstage. I'm like, are you kidding? Of course. So I go backstage and I have 3 tapes left. And I see Morris Windsor, the drummer. I give him a tape. Oh, thanks. Yeah. All right. I see Andy Metcalf, the bass player. Oh, you're great. I thought you were great. Here's one of my tapes. Oh, thank you very much. He's very sweet, very polite, Thank you very much. There's Peter Buck from REM who was sitting in with Robin and the Egyptians that night. I'm like, yeah, that's the guy from REM. And I make a beeline straight for Robin. I skip him. I've only got one tape left. Skip Peter Buck and go up to meet Robin. Oh yeah, I remember you. You're from the Insect Heads. I've got you a single, man. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm just going along with it. And I give him my tape. Oh, thanks. Yeah, cool. All right. And so incredible intersection that began with that moment, right? A few days later, I get a phone call from Scott. He leaves a voicemail. Hey, this is Scott Miller, and my friend Joe gave me your cassette. And I listened to it. I thought this is great stuff, and would just love to talk to you about music. So give me a call. Okay, and that was the beginning. I called Scott back. We had a wonderful talk. I think the thing that I maybe cherish the most, more than anything else, no matter how much music, we did together, or how much his music mattered to me, our shared sense of humor, the fact that we could make each other laugh, that we got each other and could play off each other with humor. That's I think the most cherished thing I hold, in my thoughts of Scott. And it's been good for me to, when we were working on a reissue of the record that we did together, we did this reissue for Omnivore. The album was called What If It Works. Going through all my old emails, looking up, our correspondence during the time we were making the record, and the humor is right there. It's all there. Everything I remembered is as I remember it. So I'm glad for that. But anyway, back to them days. Scott ended up producing a track for my band, the Joy Boys. He came to Sacramento. I mean, he like me, grew up in Sacramento. He was always back there visiting his parents, or if he had a dentist appointment, he'd always call me up for a coffee. Hey, I'm coming to town. And so yeah, he came, produced a track for the band. And I think, like you're saying, he's really patient, just made you feel like what you were doing was great, that all the ideas were good. Let's consider them all, and I like that one the most. Let's work with that. Who's very incredibly diplomatic and gentle and excited and encouraging, and everything sounded great. The funny thing is, I feel like I picked kind of like a B-side. I wasn't sure. Somebody else is going to produce me. I don't want to give them my best song. So the song I picked, years later, I think, I kind of wish it's okay. It was perfectly suited for the moment. And it was more about the moment than anything else. But working with him that one time was fantastic. And from there on, we had our friendship. I'd see him in town, or I'd see him in San Francisco. And I'd always send him my stuff, and I kept track on what he was up to. And then he came back and did something on my next record. And then when I think he was going through a pretty rough time. He was getting divorced, And I was living in the Bay Area at that time. I'd go over to his place and we'd hang out, and then he'd help me I recorded lots of vocals for my record with him producing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. We just kept doing stuff, especially while he was having a rough time. It just seemed, let's just do music. Then he'd come back and he'd help work on it. He'd come produce another song for me bit by bit. So yeah, we I don't know how to assess the friendship, because after he died, people said, "Oh man, you guys were so close. It must be so." And I thought, were we? I didn't know that. I wasn't sure. I always assumed that, I always assumed that so and so was. These were the people that were close to him, and I was just a peripheral player. But maybe we were close. I cherish whatever it was, because it was good, and we made each other laugh, and that's tops in my book. So yeah, we did. We ended up making a record together called "What If It Works." It was pretty cool. A really fun, loose record compared to, I think compared to how Scott tended to work. This was much more spontaneous, and it was good. But the funny, kind of crazy thing for me about that night at the Fillmore was that years later, I ended up working with Andy and Morris, aka the Egyptians, Robin Hitchcock's guys. And the first thing I did with Morris was at a studio in Berlin, and we recorded a version of a song of mine called the Banana Song. And this led me to get in touch with Andy Metcalf, who I had also already been doing some work with, and say, "Hey, Andy, I've done something with Morris. Would you want to play on it?" And he says, "Yeah, all right." So that was the beginning of what became for me 3 Minute Teas, my band with Andy and Morris, aka the Egyptians. I said to Scott, "Hey, I've done this song with Andy and Morris from the Egyptians. Would you want to play on it?" "Sure." So Scott sends a guitar track. So that's got everybody, all the people that I met because of the Fillmore night, years later, are now connected on this track.
Awesome.
And to take it one step further, and this is a hard one, take it one step further. So a few years down the line, it was, I was on Zonderstrasse, which is the street I lived on in Berlin, and also the street that I first recorded with Morris on, which is a weird coincidence. There was a little studio there before I'd ever moved there. And I was walking past what was the studio. It was long gone now. Walking past that, I got a phone call from my friend Karen, and she said, "Scott's died." And it was just right there, where that happened. And right in front of the studio where that connecting point occurred. Here it is years later, and I hear that Scott's died. So it was, lots of weird circles there.
But that short period of time that we were all part of that scene just is indelibly marked in my heart, and no one's ever tried to collect the stories. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is collect the stories, and then where did people go, and how did they come back? So here you are now, all this world traveling, and now you're back into this area.
Yeah.
Does this feel more like home to you than abroad, or talk a little bit about that? Yeah. What does this area mean to you?
Being back in Sacramento, I spent a lot of time there in the past few years. My father died earlier this year, and starting August of last year, a year ago, he went into hospice. So I became, my job became looking after my dad, and so at his house, at my house there. And so really coming back to Sacramento, getting having a renewed sense of love for the place. Thinking, there's something really sweet here. I mean, my dad's street, all the neighbors are neighbors. They all know each other. They all help each other, look after each other, are happy to see each other. And it's so easy to go from there, to walk around McKinley Park. Julie and I got married at the Greek church across from McKinley, because she's Greek heritage. And so much of my life there has come back to haunt me in a really good way. And that's what the Manbird record is all about. It's about zipping between Berlin or Europe and Sacramento, coming back here. I think the idea is that when when I sell my dad's house, which looks like we'll be doing that soon, you know, that's gone. And that frees me up to kind of start traveling again. But I'm still wanting to build this into more and more of my home with Julia. You know, if you compare the studio space to the rest of the house, you know, there aren't any other purple doors and orange walls elsewhere. This is my little space, but trying to create a special world for ourselves here is really cool. This is that right? Okay.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
This is Anton Barbeau. The Sacramento music scene in the 80s. I was there. Where were you?